All right, guys, welcome into the Auburn Postgame Show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. I'm Simone Eli alongside Wes Sinor. Just a bit ago over on the Plains, this one went final as Auburn improves to 2-0 with a 24-16 win over San Jose State. This game a tad bit closer and a little more competitive, as we can say, than I think a lot of people thought, Wes. I mean, Auburn entered the game more than a 3-touchdown favorite. This was a close game, the entire game, really. San Jose State had an opportunity to not only be ahead throughout the game, but also potentially win late in the game. What is your overall view when you look at this one?
Not impressed with Auburn tonight. I think this not really a game that you expected to, come down to the last possession where it's like, okay, if San Jose State converts this first down, then they'll have a chance to stay in the game. Like you said, they were a 3-touchdown favorite. So, I think as Auburn, for Auburn fans, I think you would have liked to see a lot more, especially from the offense tonight. I think the defense was fine overall, but offense really just struggled to get going. That first half was just so slow. I mean, and really Ashford and Finley throwing those early interceptions was kind of set the tone for just a kind of a sluggish first half, but they did look better in the second half.
Now, let's talk about the two-quarterback system. Brian Harsin said earlier this week he was going to do something similar in this week like he did in last week for the Mercer game. He was going to play both Finley and Robbie Ashford. We saw both guys early and often throughout the game. To me, I'm not a football coach. I don't get paid to coach football, but to me, it kind of has to impact the team when it comes to just being able to progress offensively. When you have different guys with different styles coming on and off the field, Wes, it's got to be hard to manage. Do you feel like Harsin is still trying to figure out who the starter is, or is this two-quarterback system going to be long-term?
I think the jury is still out on who the best quarterback is for this team this season for Auburn. Obviously, in week one, seeing Robbie Ashford run around a lot, I think it excited a lot of the fan base, and because they kind of knew what they had with Finley, but had yet to really see Ashford play. Didn't even really see him at Oregon because he didn't see the field at Oregon, and at least the football field. I know he played baseball, but so I think that he kind of generated some excitement and last week. But I didn't think we were going to learn anything new tonight necessarily. I think after Penn State next week, we'll have a better idea, because that's really the first test for Auburn this season. Obviously they struggled at times tonight with San Jose State, but that's going to be the barometer, I think, for the quarterback. I think we'll have a better idea of is it going to be Finley? Is it going to be Ashford? Is it going to be a mix of both? I think next week we'll have some of those answers.
Yeah, the comments are rolling in. If you're just tuning in, it's the Auburn Postgame Show brought to you by Medical Properties Trust. He's Wes. I'm Simone. We're talking Auburn's win over San Jose State. It was ugly, and there's really no other way to say that. Hot garbage.
Hot garbage.
9 tells us. Guys, I appreciate your comments. Keep them coming. At the end of the day, a win is a win, but this is something where, Brian Harsin and company want to go back and watch the tape and go, guys, this isn't going to get it done. Not in the SEC West, not against teams like Alabama, definitely not against teams like Georgia. This is not going to get it done. San Jose State should not have been a competition, and they were. Not only that, they led throughout the game at times. Let's talk about some stats really quick. TJ Finley, 13 of 20 in the air, 167 yards, and an interception. There were moments where it felt like he was getting into a rhythm, but you have to imagine it's difficult for not only the quarterback to get into a rhythm, but for the entire offense to get into a rhythm a little bit. When you are doing the two-quarterback system, it's just not easy to go in, to get your adrenaline going, to maybe to lead a little bit of a drive, and then have a different guy come in and you're going to stand on the sidelines. Robbie Ashford, I remember early in the game, had a fantastic run. Next thing you know, he's on the sideline. And, there's something to say about having, and here you go. I mean, Robbie Ashford, he's a competitor. He wants to be in the game, and so does TJ Finley. And I'm sure that it kind of takes the wind out of your sails a little bit when you make a play or do something positive, and then it almost feels like you're getting pulled or replaced a little bit.
Yeah, and it's kind of like flashbacks to Gus Malzahn a little bit, at least in that 2016 season when you had Sean White or Jeremy Johnson or John Franklin III, where he's just pulling guys in and out. And it's how difficult is it going to be for this offense to mesh and to kind of
people are going to be triggered by your words right now, Wes. They're going to be triggered by this.
Are they? I don't know. People love John Franklin III because he was fast. I mean, that's what Robbie Ashford kind of reminds me of him right now, because it's we know he's fast, we know he can run, but can he really throw the ball consistently? Is he somebody that you can rely on to like run this offense. But yeah, I think it's going to be hard to build any kind of like, a system with, constantly throwing, the first and second string in and out like that. So I think it'll be tough. But again, I think I wasn't expecting to really learn anything new about the offense tonight, but they did struggle. And, obviously Auburn's like rushing game is in pretty good shape with Tank and Jarquez Hunter. But the passing offense is still not like where it needs to be.
No, it certainly is not. Auburn goes for 210 on the ground. Obviously Tank Bigsby scored on the ground. Jarquez Hunter, the bulk of that 61 yards was Robbie Ashford. So no real one like star back. They kind of share the load. Tank Bigsby carried the ball 13 times. We want to see Auburn get the ground game going. That's only going to help.
Right. I don't mean to interrupt you right here. I do know a good lawyer. My brother is actually a lawyer, so I do know.
My in-laws have season tickets, and I'm sure that they were like wanting to cry in the stands throughout parts of that game. So I mean,
I just wanted to highlight that one comment real quick, but continue what you're saying.
No, that's awesome. I mean, there was definitely moments where it was like, okay, like what is this? What's going on? If there are some bright spots, let's take a look at some of these stats. San Jose State goes for just 54 yards rushing. That to me that speaks maybe to a little bit of what they do offensively, what their scheme is like, but I feel like for Auburn to kind of hold their stance a little bit in the ground game defensively, that we have to look at some sort of bright spots here, Wes.
Yeah, I mean, and the defense I think has played well both weeks for week 1 and week 2. Not really giving up a lot of points either week, and not a ton of yards either. So I don't think there's really any major concerns for the defensive side of the ball, at least right now. I think it's just mostly the offense that really is just like been kind of more of the question mark.
Yeah. Got a comment here from Christian Crawford. It says, Auburn gave Bo Nix 3 years. Now y'all want to give TJ 7 games, Robbie 2 games. And here's the thing. I mean, yeah, that's what we do in the media. We overreact. We find things to discuss. Fans certainly overreact. That's what they do. But listen, the bulk of the season has not even begun. Week 3, where the game we've talked about, it's going to be the CBS game, the 2:30 game against Penn State. That's the one that everyone has kind of circled. And you would hope by now that there would be a lot more things that were answered than there were questions. And I feel like maybe this was a little bit of a step back in week 2. And I feel like there's maybe some more questions than we thought there was going to be, Wes.
I think so too. I think, going from week 1 to week 2, like you said, you want to improve. You always hear coaches, it's a lot of coach speak all the time, but coaches always talk about the improvement, week in and week out and going, sure. You want to like get better each week. Right. But I don't think Auburn got better this week. I think they kind of took a step back from the Mercer game. I know San Jose State was a better opponent, obviously from they're a Division I school, FBS school, and Mercer's FCS. So, you expected kind of a little tougher fight from San Jose State. But again, I don't think this should have been a one possession win. I mean, or one
sure.
one score game.
Certainly should not have been as close as it was.
No, definitely not. I don't think so. So I think there should be some concern going into this Penn State game. It was a close game last year, and I think a lot of Auburn fans are looking forward to it. Obviously, a big game. It's a 2:30 game, and this is again the first test of the season. So, everybody's looking ahead to that game at this point, I would say.
No doubt about it. Some questions here. About Calzada, wondering what his status is. He was injured during the preseason practice going into fall camp and things like that. What his status is with that, not entirely sure. But I'll tell you this, if you're Brian Harsin, you're not trying to look like you have less control. You're not going to throw a third guy into this circus of trying to figure out what the quarterback situation is, in my opinion. At this point, you've dialed in on the 2 guys. You're hoping one of them is going to emerge. If you continue with the 2 quarterback system, you have to, he's done it before. And that's what we talked about with Tom Green on the pregame show. Tom, said at different stops, Boise State and previous stops, that Harsin has done this and done this successfully. Sure. But you have to know the identity of your team, and you have to know what works and what's going to flow with the guys that you have in your locker room. It's not for us to decide, but it's certainly our job to get to talk about it.
Yeah, and from what I heard just coming out of fall camp, that it was clear that it was going to be Finley or Ashford, and that then there was like a big gap after that where Calzada was, and it was partly because of the injury, partly because he didn't play in the spring at all and wasn't really able to do spring camp or anything like that, or the 8A game. But the other part is from what we heard, at AL.com, is that he just wasn't able to like pick up things as quickly as Ashford seemed to be doing it in fall camp, and maybe it was the lingering injury. But it seemed to be clear going into the season that Calzada was like the clear third string. Sure. So at this point, like, he's still on the roster, he's still available, sure. And if things go really poorly against Penn State with both Ashford and Finley, maybe you turn to Calzada. But at this point, I think they're still trying to figure out, is it Finley or Ashford? I think those are the two guys that they're focused most on. And Calzada, at this point, unfortunately, is kind of at the bottom looking up on the depth chart. But that's one thing I wanted to mention real quick. Tom Green had a story earlier today before the game started, I guess. Auburn tweaked their depth chart to say that it was, instead of Finley 1, Ashford 2, it was Finley or Ashford on the depth chart that they released. And it was like a last second change that they made. So technically that means it's not really first and second string. It's like either or.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's exactly what they did. I mean, when you have both guys playing on the very first drive, to me, you don't really have a starter. Regardless of who you roll out, you don't really have a starter. But I didn't get the feeling that Harsin wanted to like ride one guy either, because when you have one guy do something well, whether it was Robbie Ashford for a large game, we saw that a couple times. Obviously, then he threw the pick, so the turnover there. But it seems like, okay, if a guy gets into a little bit of a rhythm, he wasn't really keeping him in necessarily. So, I mean, again, Harsin was hired because of his offensive genius. Obviously, that we've heard this song and dance before on the plains. So we'll see what it looks like. Jason makes a good point. Zach Calzada beat Bama a year ago. Here's the thing. There is something to be said about game experience. Like we got a comment earlier about Robbie Ashford maybe being a little, sporadic and not really mentally being there. Well, that's obviously takes experience. Zach Calzada led Texas A&M to one of the biggest games in Aggie history. The guy has game experience, and that certainly helps.
Yeah, definitely. And, it's just unfortunate. It's kind of ironic because he got injured in the Auburn game last year, and then he transfers to Auburn, and he's not able to compete for Auburn because Auburn injured him. Yeah. So that's just like the crazy, ironic part about it. But, again, like I think it's just a little too early for Auburn to figure out what they want to do. Like, again, Ashford doesn't have the experience. And look, if you get an injury, then I think Calzada's, obviously moving up immediately. An injury would happen. But other than that, I just think that you just have to wait and to see how this Penn State game goes. Like if Finley holds his own, I think they're going to just keep going with Finley and just kind of put Ashford in occasionally when they want to have that fast, run.
But here's my issue with that, Wes. Here's my issue with that. Okay. This Penn State game I understand it's not a conference game, but this isn't the sort of thing where we need to go test things out if you're Auburn. It's not, okay, let's go see how things go and figure it out. At this point, if you're Brian Harsin, you've gone through fall camp, you've had Ashford in there, you've gone through all of the quarterback battle. You want to know who your guy is going into week 3, because there's no secret this was the week 3 game. So it's an opportunity for Auburn to put a stamp on their national, what they can do nationally to be in a Big Ten matchup like this. And I don't like that there are all these questions, that there's still this figuring out.
You don't like the quarterback controversy. You just want the one guy.
I mean, at this point, you would just think that you would have more answers than you would have questions.
Sure. Yeah, and I don't think necessarily that in the past at Auburn, I think you hear a 2-quarterback system and fans kind of like freak out because it hasn't really ever worked at Auburn.
Yeah.
I think Harsin.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
You're good.
Like you mentioned, Harsin has done it in the past. He's had some success with 2 quarterbacks in the past, but I just don't think, at least in recent memory, it's never really worked at Auburn. So I think, you want to know who the guy is, like you said, but if Ashford, they're so different. I mean, Ashford is so fast and Finley is more of the pocket passer, who's the bigger guy who gets he can get the shorter runs and the power runs and stuff like that too. But just, I think it's an asset to have Ashford, even if maybe Harsin doesn't really trust him to put the ball in the air very much. You would think that in this game, assuming, they're a 3-point or a 3-touchdown favorite, Auburn gets ahead enough that they really get to kind of open the playbook with Ashford in this game. But they weren't able to do that because the offense wasn't producing enough for them to get ahead. And so now it's like hoping to kind of answer some of these questions if you build up a big lead against San Jose State and you're not able to. So you didn't really learn much in this game, I don't think.
Yeah.
Going into Penn State. So
Speaking of Penn State, looking at what they did today, they beat Ohio out of the MAC, 46-10, the final. In week 1, they beat Purdue, a Big Ten matchup there, 35-31. So I'm not going to say that Penn State's been battle tested. I mean, if it's Purdue, okay, it's Purdue. But regardless, they're 2-0 on the season. This is a team that wants to come on the road in the SEC and get a win, certainly, of course. And Auburn wants to do the same at home in their 3rd game of the season. It's certainly an opportunity to see what kind of where they're at. There's no doubt Harsin and the Tigers will figure out where they are at a week from today.
Absolutely, yeah. And you win that game, you go to 3-0. I think the outlook for the season completely changes.
Completely.
I think it does completely. And if you lose that game, I think there's going to be people really frustrated with how things are going. And I've already seen some Harsin comments in here about how people aren't happy with Harsin. It's really, I think it's going to go either way. Like, you win the game, I think it'll end up being a pretty decent season, honestly. If you lose the game, I think it might snowball for Auburn. Well, but that's just, we'll see. I don't know. You never know what's going to happen, but
you never know. That you pretty much answered Nathan Fleury's question. He asked, Sinor, do you think Auburn is headed in the right direction? He put you on the spot.
He did.
It's 11 o'clock on Saturday, after week 2 of the season, and he wants to know if Auburn's heading.
Is Auburn heading in the right direction? Not at this moment. I don't think so. Not right now. If they might change my mind next week. If they beat Penn State, I will say yes.
There you go. There you go, Nathan. Ask us again next week, and we'll see where we're at.
Yeah, come back next week, and we'll.
No doubt. All right, guys. Thanks so much for tuning into the Auburn Postgame Show. Wes and I did not plan this outfit of choice, but I think it worked out for this show. So
orange and blue for the postgame show. Not bad.
Auburn gets it done. The final 24-16, the final over San Jose State. Not a cute win, not a pretty win, but a win is a win. 2-0 going.
Yeah, they're 2-0.
That's the way you roll in college football. You take every win that you can. 24-16, the final from the Plains. Guys, thanks for tuning into the Auburn Postgame Show. Brought to you by Medical Properties Trust.
Medical Properties Trust, at the very heart of healthcare.